Okay guys, so now that December's rolled around, it is time to do another reptile room tour. The last one I did was way back in October. I decided to skip November's reptile room tour because I just thought I'd be going over the same stuff that I went over in the previous video. So I've left it till December and now I've actually got a lot to talk about. So without further ado, let's get straight on with the video. Also, it's just worth mentioning that if you can hear rain, that's because it is raining, and you can ignore that. So as ever, the first reptile I've got to update you about is Speckles the leopard gecko. Now, if you've been watching any of my other reptile room tours, at least the recent ones, you'll know that absolutely nothing has been going on with Speckles himself. He's still a max snow leopard gecko because that's never going to change, and he is doing really well as ever. Although I have been mentioning recently about doing him a new enclosure, a bigger, better improved one, and you can probably tell that there is some slight changes with Speckles' enclosure right now. This is not his new setup, it's still the same as the other one, but I did have to actually move him to install a new vivarium that I set up properly last week. But in terms of changes, the only real change is that he's now got an Arcadia Shade Dweller UVB bulb instead of a compact bulb, and that will be joining him in his new setup, which I'll be doing in about a fortnight's time. But for now, there's not really anything to update you on, although do keep your eyes peeled for that full update video on Speckles that'll be coming in the near future. So next up, we're going to be taking a look at Splat the Crested. Splat is a Harlequin crested gecko. He sort of fires up to have an orange patterning and a reddish brown colour on the base. But he himself, like Speckles, he's doing really well. Throughout the winter, he does usually tend to go off eating fruit type stuff, like his crested gecko diets. He stops eating those, and he does start to eat more insects, but he's still doing just as well as ever, and you might be able to tell that his enclosure's a bit different, so let's take a look at that in depth. So the first most noticeable change is going to be with the Regalia Bromeliads. These haven't half been blushing a lot recently and they look really pink now. I have been moving them about a bit, so I've attached one to the branch which you're looking at right now, hoping it'll root on, and I did move one to the tropical vivarium, but as time goes by I can only hope that these will get pinker, and they do really look quite awesome. The next change is actually a bit of a downgrade, and that is for Splat's lighting. So I did used to have the T8 UVB bulb stretched across this, but I did actually have to move that to the tropical vivarium, which I'll talk about in a second. I know I keep mentioning it, but it is coming. Instead of having that now, I have got a compact bulb on there, which is kind of suboptimal. I'm not really keen on using compacts, but in the next few months I am planning on doing a big light upgrade for Splat, and I'll get some proper stuff with his own DP projector and that, so that should be good. But for now, this is what he's got, and he is doing really well with it, so it'll make do for now. And next up, of course, we do have the tropical enclosure. I only set this up last week, or I think it was last week's video, or maybe the one before that. I'll leave a link to it, whatever, in the top right hand corner of the screen right now, and you can check that out if you want. So I'm not really going to talk about the setup that much because I've only recently done it. But to cut a long story short, it is just doing absolutely incredible. It's got no animals in it because the ones I want to put in it so far haven't been available, and I also want to let it grow in a bit. But under the skylights, which they're the LED plant growth bulbs I've got on it, the plants have grown so fast. I'll show you them in a second, but this enclosure, it just really is doing so fantastically well, and I can only hope, like with the Bromeliads in Splat's tank, that it'll keep getting better and better. Taking a look at a closer level, you can really see how much the stuff has been growing under these lights. The aluminium plant, the Pilea cardieri, I think it's called, that has been going phenomenally. You can see that entire leaf node on the top of that one is completely new, and over here as well, just absolutely incredible growth. The moss on the bark that you can see, this round, and also the one that was on the side of the enclosure, that has really greened up nicely. Then the Magravia that's I'm chaining up the background, has sent off loads of shoots. I was sort of expecting it to die back, and it hasn't. The pink veined Fittonia, that is almost looking red in that shot because of how pink it's gone. The sphagnum moss has been growing out, although the air plant in there has not been doing that well. It's the only plant out of the lot that's not done fantastic. I think because it's too wet in there. It was always going to be hit and miss with an air plant, but we'll see how it goes. Then the creeping fig, the oak leaf fig, that is doing great, growing nice and fast. Moving across the enclosure, that's the bromeliad that I nicked out of Splat's enclosure, and it does seem to be blushing. It was, because of where it wasn't really blushing at all in Splat's tank. And then the last plant we have to look at is the Vricea, and that is actually turning slightly purple in places, which is cool. Now, moving swiftly onwards, I don't want to dwell on the tropical enclosure, because it's new. I can sort of feel myself being prone to talking about it for ages, but I did make a really in-depth video on it, so if you want to find out more about it, then I did leave a link to that video up in the cards that you can still check out. So if you want to find out more, then do have a look at that video. But now I'm going to talk about Red the corn snake and its enclosure. This hasn't really changed at all. Still got lots of leaf litter in it. Still a 5x2x2 enclosure with UVB lighting on it. Red has just been doing really good in this enclosure. Eating all the time, striking really well. To be honest, it never really comes out from underneath this log. I'll show you him in a sec, right? But he tends to just hide there all the time. And I think that's partially because of it's like coming into winter now. Well, it is winter properly now, but throughout the summer, he tends to be more active, roaming about. And then as the temperatures drop, he does start to sleep a lot more. In future years, I am going to be brumating all of my animals that can brumate. So Speckles the leopard gecko, Red the corn snake, and Char the bearded dragon, because I honestly think that if that's what they're going to do in nature, then that is what they're designed to do, and in captivity we should try and facilitate everything that we can for them so that they can live as natural lives as possible. Obviously removing sort of stress factors like predation and disease, because those things aren't good, but other stuff it is sort of our duty to provide. So as promised, let's take a look at Red. He always likes to hang out under here. Not too sure why this is his favourite place, but as you can see, he's a lovely orange colour. Actually a hypermelanistic corn snake. I don't really get him out that often because I like to just leave him to it, but he is really friendly. You can see I'm touching him quite near his head there, and he's never bothered. He feeds really well, strikes every time, and he is actually still growing slowly. He never had the best start to life, if I'm being perfectly honest. I did have to take him to the vets within a couple of months of getting him, but he's doing really well now, and he's completely bounced back from that early mishap in his life, and he is one of my favourite reptiles. I mean, I've only got 4 and they're all my favourite. Whichever one I'm holding's my favourite, basically. But yeah, that is Red, and so we can move on to the final reptile. So last but not least in the reptile room tour comes an update on Char the bearded dragon. You'll be able to tell that his setup really has not changed since the last reptile room tour, but Char himself, a lot has happened with him. In the last reptile room tour, I was worrying about him all the time, what was happening with him, thinking he was ill, this, that and the other. But since then, I have made a complete update video on him, all to himself. But if you haven't watched that video, basically to cut a long story short, I took Char the vets, and it turned out that there was nothing really wrong with him. He got some sort of precautionary treatment, and me and the vet decided that it would be the best case for him to go into brumation for a month. Now that month will be up in a week's time, so I'll start warming him back up, and he'll be awake for the next reptile room tour, hopefully. But basically the only thing I can update you on is that really he's just slept under here for the entire time. I've weighed him once a week, and having not eaten in over a month, I think, because he did stop eating a bit before I actually put him into brumation properly. He's only lost 1 gram, so I am really happy with how he's doing, and I can't wait to see him again, because honestly I have been missing him. Anyway guys, that pretty much wraps up the reptile room tour. I've not had too many updates since the last one. Well, I sort of have with the new vivarium and all that, so I'm talking rubbish. But what I mean to say really is that lots of the proper updates are incoming. So with Char waking up, with Speckle's new setup, and hopefully with the inhabitants finally for the tropical vivarium. But for now, that is the end of this video, and from me and Red the Corn Snake, that is goodbye. So I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.